kind of a discussion. So the next session speaks about granular energy intelligence, which in for cold chain solutions, which I am very much looking forward, because these days we speak a lot on energy management, data management, analytics, and all of this has seeped into our heavy machinery industry as well. So what I see is a very good partnership of intelligence, artificial intelligence, and mechanical industry, which will help us in advancement of cold chain infrastructure. So I'm very much looking forward for the session, which will be given by Mr. Murli Arikara, who is the CTO of Rakana Energy. Sir, please be on the stage. A huge round of applause. So Mr. Murli has experience with batteries, fuel cells, electrical mobility, energy management. He has been awarded 9 US patents for his contribution to energy technology, which is huge. And he is also the co-founder of Jadoo Power Systems. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. What I think you've all heard about refrigeration, and you're all experts in refrigeration, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'll talk about energy. And what I would like to talk about is not just the fact that you need energy management, but I'll start off with why you need it, why it's important, so that you understand the implication. And it's not just something that's immediate, it's also something for a short term, medium term, and long term, what the outlook is. So if you look at this, you all understand this. I don't have to talk much about it. Your market is continuing to grow, and growing at pretty high speeds. Not just the cold chain market, but the overall refrigeration market itself. When you include air conditioners and others, I think numbers I've heard is about 3 to 4 times in the next 5 to 10 years, just going to see growth. But what we are finding is, with this growth, what feeds this growth is the way I would put it. Like, you are doing something to save the food, but all your equipment is consuming electricity, which is the food for your equipment and for your industry. What do we need to do to conserve it and sustain ourselves with it? So why am I talking about it? It's because of our current energy situation in India. So today, if you look at fossil and non-fossil fuel, this is what I call the installed capacity. Right? Installed capacity meaning, this is what, if it runs 24/7 produces energy, then it's take all this multiplied by 8,760 hours a year, that's how much energy you're getting. But the story is not there. What you find is, in this thing, these renewables have what we call a plant capacity factor of 20%, which means that though my solar panel is rated for 1 gigawatt, it only produces that 1 gigawatt for about 20% of the time. Rest of the time it's asleep. So your overall energy is less. So today, about 70% of your electricity that is supplied in India comes from fossil fuels. Why is that important? It's important for 2 or 3 reasons. One, if you look at what the country and the world is looking at, we are looking at going away from fossil fuels for various reasons. Don't need to talk about it. The other thing is, today most of our energy comes from coal, and we have a limited supply of coal. So if I looked at the reserves we have in India today, if I use all of it, that's giving me about 40-50 years worth of electricity. After that, what do I do? Right? So that's the question. And if you look at statistics again, the other statistic I want to throw at you is per capita consumption of electricity in India today is around 1,000 units. Globally, it's close to about 3 times that. And if you look at China, we're talking about 4 times that. Now, why am I throwing these numbers? It's because what's happening in India is a transition. Our economy is growing at a pretty high rate. And to sustain that growth, electricity is one of the most important sources that will sustain that growth. Without that, you're not going to be able to sustain. So there are 3 things that are important when we talk about electricity and sustainability. Three things are energy security, environment, economics. All three have to work together. Only then you have something that is sustainable. So your industry, if you look at it and say, in 50 years, 60 years, can I continue providing the services I provide? That depends on this factor. And that's why this part of the equation is important. That's why India is spending a lot of effort in building, whether you look at large solar, wind, and all these associated factors that come with it. So why this becomes more important is specifically here. The government has put a target which says that they want to reduce cooling energy demand by 25 to 40%. What they mean by that is not that as you keep increasing, you keep decreasing your energy. That's not what they mean. They mean the efficiency at which you are cooling needs to improve by 25 to 40%. So how do you do that? Those things are all needed to hit this target that we put for our country. The world has said that by 2050 we'll get to net zero. I'm sure everyone understands what net zero is. Yeah. So net zero is just that you want to make sure that there is no net carbon addition into the environment as a result of human activity. So what we are looking at is getting to that point. So we need to reduce our emission intensity, and what we mean by emission intensity is for every kilowatt hour of electricity we produce today, we produce a certain amount of carbon dioxide. We want to reduce that by 2030, so that we can hit this target by 2070. So I'm throwing all the statistic to you. Why? Because this is what's happening in your industry. Right? Your energy consumption in the cold chain market is expected to grow at this level. Which means if everything stays constant, this is your energy cost, and this is how much carbon emissions are going to come in as a result of that growth, if you do nothing. Right? That's critical, and that's important. So and these again are numbers that you are probably more familiar with, but I just looked at the numbers and said, not in terms of the numbers, but what that means in terms of the energy consumption you are looking at. Significant growth in energy consumption that you need to meet this demand. How do you do it? How do you go about it? Becomes an important question. So what's important is every one of you, part of the cold chain, have to look at it and say, what can we do? How do we get to the point where we also create our own targets to get to net zero? As facilities, as buildings, what do we do? As most of you have said, I think time and time again, speakers have said, the cold chain is refrigeration, 80% of the energy consumed, and I'm not going to go into all this. I think there are enough experts here, but 80% of your overall energy consumption goes towards refrigeration. Now, one of the things we found is the operating costs in India for the refrigeration part are much higher than what it is rest of the world, for various reasons. There are inefficiencies here. These are not numbers I created, these numbers that I'm researched and pulled out, and my team has helped pull out. And electricity becomes about 30% of your operating costs. Again, people can tell me it is or it is not, but that's the statistic we have. And that to me, in some sense, as a ideal number, it doesn't matter, but to give a rough order of magnitude, that's what we're looking at. So what's happening? Lots of things are changing in the world. Right? You are used to having a electricity grid that comes in and provides you electricity. In India, there are a lot of places in India where electricity is not available 24 hours a day. So you back them up with diesel gensets, and I think earlier speaker talked about the fact that, you know what, we as human beings can afford to have a few hours of no refrigeration, no air conditioning, but our cargo is very valuable. That can't afford that. So you usually back it up with diesel gensets and other things. Those again add to the problem. So one, There is an expectation on a year on, so this year, earlier, I think there was a reduction in electricity tariff to a lot of people. However, if you look at the trend on a long-term basis, there is a continuous increase. So wholesale electricity prices have been growing, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, at about 10 to 15%. So I wouldn't be surprised in a few years' time, and I say a few years, 10 to 15 years, if someone says that per unit I'm going to start paying 12 to 15 rupees a unit. Now that's going to hit you much harder than what we have talked about so far. And there's a lot of changes coming where people are talking about time of day pricing. People are talking about changing how electricity is going to be delivered to you. They're talking about more distributed systems. So all these things are having lots of changes. So if you looked at the internet and said the last few years, last few decades were decade of disruption there, and that created all these opportunities and also killed a lot of other businesses. You're going to see the same when it comes to energy. Energy is going to change. There's a lot of disruption coming up. Because of that disruption, which is because of solar, wind and other things, a lot of changes are going to come. So how do you prepare yourself for it? So there are 3 things that you need to be ready for, or 3 things you can do, prepare for it. Digitization, decarbonization and decentralization. These 3 aspects will be where the disruption is going to come. When we talk about digitization, what we mean is the ability for you to understand what is happening in your facility. Seeing every step of the way, what is happening, how is it operating, when is it operating. So if I come to most of you and ask you, do you know how much electricity you consume? I am sure most of you will tell me, I have my electricity bill, I know how much diesel liters I'm consuming, so here's my number. But if I come and ask you, do you know why you're consuming that much? You will all have very good guesses, probably. You will tell me it could be this, it could be that, it could be something else. What digitization does, it helps you understand when you're consuming electricity, where you're consuming energy, and how you're consuming energy. Because once you understand these 3 things, you know why you're consuming your energy. Once you understand all these aspects, then you know how to save energy. So saving energy comes in 3 simple ways. First, you understand where you have leakages in your system. And what I mean by leakages is, are you overcooling something? You may have a requirement to say, I need to cool something at minus 18 degrees or minus 20 degrees. You look and say, okay, if it's minus 20 and minus 22, what's the big difference to me? Still food is all safe. But that minus 1 degree change is going to affect how much energy you're consuming significantly. Right? So that's the first part. Are there any leakages in your system? Or are there places where, for example, your seals on your doors are not proper, because of which there's leakage of cold air going, or is someone forgetting to shut the door, etc., etc. You understand the space, so that's one part. The second part is around your assets themselves. Are they operating as efficiently and effectively as they need to? What happens with a lot of electrical machines is they degrade over time. They are still doing their job, but they degrade over time. So I'll give you an example. We are helping a cold chain warehouse in the Middle East. And I'll talk a little bit about their case study at the end of this. What we found was some of their compressors were more than 15 years old, still running. But what we found with those were the power factors on those machines are less than 0.6 at loading of over 60-65%. Now what we mean by that is there is something wrong with it. What you realized is the windings in the motors over time, the insulation had slowly degraded, because of which there's a lot more energy and current needed to run that machine, which is not necessarily benefiting you, but it's causing you to add a lot more load into your system. Right? So those are types of things you can look at. So why do that? So that's the second. And the third is, can you make change in your process so the output stays the same, however your energy consumption reduces? These 3 measures together can give you anywhere from a 25 to 40% reduction in energy consumption. It's a 25 to 40%. That's, and I'm not saying it'll happen day one. It's a process that you work with. and you get to that point. So when you looked at it, this is the part, but that's not the only thing. This part is what we attack. But then beyond that, because you're looking at every aspect of the electrical consumption, what you're doing is it's almost like tying an ECG around every major asset you have. And it tells you, okay, something is varied, something is changed, it's not supposed to be that way. You're able to understand it. There are aspects where we've also helped our customers understand when someone has a equipment that's gone for maintenance and their vendor has come and fixed that or claimed that they have fixed that equipment, and then that equipment has failed after 15 days. And what we found and what we helped them understand is, you know what, that equipment has not really been fixed because nothing has really changed between the two visits. And when we went in and understood a little bit more, what had happened is a technician came and he was under pressure to fix it and make it work. So he bypassed a safety thing that was in there, and he said, you know what, let me just bypass it because that's what's tripping the system. So he did not understand why this is tripping. He just said, okay, I'll bypass it. Now everything is fine. But the problem was it ran for 10 days and had a much bigger failure. Right? So we are able to identify, look, and understand these things. This is what the digitization and energy monitoring helps with. When you can go down to that level of depth, that you can look at it, it's like tying, I'll repeat it again, it's like tying an ECG around each asset that you have. And any variation you get, because electricity is the one place where you'll find every little variation, if you look for it. Okay? So when we talk about getting to net zero, like I said, this is the first part of it. Whatever I have described so far is this part of it. And to a certain extent, this part. So you start here, then you understand these pieces. A lot of places where what we find is people say, oh, let me put some renewables in there. But you don't really understand how much renewables you need, right? So this helps you to understand first, what is your energy consumption, what is your pattern, does it make sense, and then you add your renewables, and if there's any backup needed, you get to that, and that allows you to actually, as a comprehensive solution, get to a net zero platform. So how do you do, what happens? Because you can consume, so I work for REFCON Energy. What we have developed is some fairly unique technology. What we say is we have the ability to collect among the deepest energy data of anyone out there. And what it allows us to do is help our customers, because we collect data at that deep granular level, to create what I call a universe of insights. These are all the possibilities, and this is something we can do without really putting much effort into doing it. Meaning there are some basic information, basic programs behind it, and we're able to give them all this information. Today we work with a whole wide variety of customers. We have customers in the cold chain in the Middle East. We have large multi-tenanted facilities. We have malls. We have, the range is from small to large. We even have small quick serve restaurants. We have close to about 200 quick serve restaurants across India that we manage. So we can look at any scale of your building. A lot of people have come to us and said, look, I already have a building management system in my facility. Why do I need you? That takes care of everything. What you find with the building management system is it has data, it has information at a much higher level. What we do is go into the depth of it. What I mean by that is, when we measure each sample of electricity information, we are not just measuring how much energy is consumed. We are measuring voltage, we are measuring the harmonics, we are measuring frequencies, we are measuring power factors. Everything is being measured. So close to about 15, 16 different aspects from an electricity characteristic standpoint is what we measure. And that's what helps us get to this universe of insights. We also have a large airline now today talking seriously for their airports and their facilities to start looking at this. So how do you do this? What is the process? It's a fairly simple thing. We start with what we call a walkthrough audit, a detailed audit, an investment grade audit. So these things really help you understand what is happening, your process, what are your requirements. And from that, we go to the design, commission, install the system, and then provide. So we come up with energy saving measures. And for each measure, we say this is what is expected. And based on that, we actually install, after we install, we measure and validate and tell you this is how much you were before, this is how much you are right now. Right? It's a fairly simple, straightforward process, no rocket science behind it. But what makes this very unique is not the process, it's the depth and granularity of data that we're able to pull out, and through that, make these decisions. So what drives it? The engine behind it is, we call our platform. There are 4 aspects to it. The hardware that we deploy, which allows us to get to that depth, analytics, algorithms, and the modeling. This is a very critical part of what we do, because of which we can actually take almost every asset you have, and through the data, they're all calibrated on what some people would say AI models. I won't use AI, I'll just say calibrated with real-time data. So as we keep collecting more and more data, these models get stronger and stronger with that data that we calibrate. That's what helps us look at it and help drive all these aspects together. From a system installation standpoint, it's fairly simple. If you go, you can look at both sides of the equation, both the load and the supply side. If you have multiple sources of supply, we can manage that. And with every source, this doesn't require, so a lot of people have heard of IoT systems where you have a lot of sensors distributed all over your facility. We don't do that. It's done at your distribution panel. Every circuit of your distribution panel is monitored, and through that we know what is coming in and what is going out, and we know what equipment is tied to each one of the circuits. Through that we can actually disassociate that information and get down to individual asset level. And what happens is all this data is available on a real-time basis through a dashboard that you can access from any location, anywhere in the world, as long as you have an internet connection. Along with it, there is a network operation center that supports it. Now, I'm not here trying to sell my company, but what I'm saying is this is all support that comes with a service like this. And it doesn't have to be us, it could be somebody else. But that's what gives you the ability to watch what is happening at every level of your facility. Right? And if there is a way to integrate a lot of these things with some of the manufacturers and help deliver to the customers, I think it benefits both the manufacturer of the equipment and the facility. Because what's happening in addition to all this data, what we find is we've also helped some of the vendors understand which AMC providers are doing a good job, which AMC providers are not doing a great job. We also help them understand through the data we collect which equipment is working well, where do they have failures in their equipment. All this information gets fed back to them. And so also the facility owner also gets a lot of information what's happening, how to allocate their energy consumption where and how. So if we look at, and I'll stop with this case study, we had a large cold storage warehouse in the Middle East, about 15,000 square meter facility that we were helping with. And what we did is within 2 months of our operation, we helped them with getting about 9% energy savings. Right? That's within 2 months of our installation at that facility. There are more measures that we can take, but this is something that we could do very quickly. Help them optimize the AHU. So they had a consumption of about 450,000 kilowatt hours a month. We were able to show about, if you look at 8.96%, about 4.9 came from just optimizing their AHU operation. Like I told you, there was the temperature that they were maintaining. We found that the temperature was much cooler than what was needed. We helped them increase that temperature. We looked at different loads, and we found that some are overloaded, some are underloaded. We helped them balance those things. And we looked at their operating hours in certain places and said that here's how you can manage that a lot better. So all these things helped reduce their energy consumption by about 9% within a 2-month period. And their requirement as a business was, as long as you can show me about a 9 to 10% energy savings, that pays for your service. And so I'm very happy with just doing that. So what we are able to do with that granular energy intelligence is give them lots of insights, and this is just the start of it. We believe that over the next 6 to 8 months, we'll be able to drive further savings in this space, close to about 15 to 20% at least. And as they work closer with us, if we are allowed to touch and work with more aspects and get into more things, that allows us to grow that savings further. So that's as a general benefit of what this provides. But that is not the only benefit. Like I said earlier, electrical safety, we monitor and understand what's happening from that standpoint. There are times where you find electrical safety is one aspect where we find very interesting data. Almost every one of you probably has a facility, or cold store. Most facility owners have facilities that are 8, 10-year old. When they started, everyone had beautiful electrical drawings of the facility. And over the next few years, there have been changes in the facility, not always recorded in the drawings. What you find is a result of that, there are a lot of safety issues that come. So one we find earth to ground to neutral voltages that come in. When those come in, and if it goes over a certain point, they're going to pop all your electronic circuits. We help identify that. We find that you might add equipment, you might upgrade your MCB, but the wire in between is not capable of handling it. That ends up having other issues. So we actually monitor all those aspects from electrical safety. Help with that. We look at your rated capacity of your equipment and see how it's operating against that rated capacity. That gives you some information. Like I said, we help understand what's happening with your individual assets. So the efficiency that we provide is only one part, you could say, but the real advantage of putting that is understanding the rest of your operation and overall helping you on that journey to go from where you are today to attain that point where you can get to net zero. Even if you're not at net zero, you know what is needed and you know how you can proceed with it. Okay? So that's where all I had. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to address.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's good session actually. I have one question on your slide that there is a mention of 16 parameters on the electrical energy. So can you explain in detail on that actually? Yeah, deep data.
Yeah, so we go in from like the common ones are voltage and current, energy, people look at. We look at apparent energy, real energy, we look at frequencies, we look at power factors, we look across the spectrum, we look at harmonics. So up to the 25th harmonic, we can look at it and get information on that. Typically what we find is the 3rd and 5th harmonic are the important ones. So if I were to say it in a different way, harmonics are things that ride on top of your sine wave. So your sine wave typically is a 50 Hertz sine wave. So because of equipment that, so let's say you have a starter, you have mechanical pieces around that creates certain harmonics to come in. Usually the 3rd and 5th are the predominant ones. Now those become very unique to your design of your equipment. So I will be able to look at that harmonic and even identify what equipment is there. So in many ways it's like fingerprinting. That's where the technology comes in. Any distortion in the harmonic is something we can pick up and say, okay, there's a distortion that could mean what. So that's the part we're developing right now to say this distortion ties to this issue that might occur in 15, 20, 30 days or few hours from now.
So this is the algorithm you use this to capture?
Yes. Yeah.
Gen,
So the hardware, like I go back to this part, the hardware is what we put to get those parameters.
Okay.
The algorithms that we use and the modeling, these all tie in together to get us to that answer that we want. So there's about 16 different, so voltage, current, frequency, harmonics, power factors, and there's a few other integral pieces in there that we all capture together to get us to what we're doing.
Okay, I have one more follow-up question. Suppose we have a lot of cold storage which is very old and we don't have this granular or detailed energy auditing approach or automatically capturing the energy. Now if somebody comes to you and say like this is our existing cold storage, a new cold storage, can you give like what are the sensors you need to fix or capturing the energy, or do you consulting like that, or that's what I mean?
So for us it's fairly simple because
or like, you are expecting the the integrator or the equipment to already
No.
there should be sensors?
No. We will come and deploy those things there. So because we don't actually tie into the equipment, we actually tie into the distribution panel of the facility. And from there we take that information. We want the ratings and other aspects of the equipment.
Okay.
So we know this is what is happening with the equipment. But from there we actually...
So from the mains only we will capture.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So, I mean, it's a little bit not so easy to believe. But you know, like, so you're not actually interfering with the equipment.
No.
So it's a standalone proprietary equipment which only ties up with the electrical
Yes.
control panel, which
Correct.
extracts the information,
Correct.
and you try to predict what is the possible issues,
Yes.
which is again equipment agnostic.
Yes.
So it could be a compressor, reciprocal, scroll, or rotary, or whatever it is.
Yes.
But still, the algorithms are pitched in
Yes.
to predict what is the type of equipment you're using,
Yeah.
and try to predict what is the problem the equipment is having.
Yeah.
So as simple
I'll
as
give a very simple
okay.
example to make this come on. So we had a customer who, not in the cold chain, but a office facility. We looked at the air conditioner and they said, within first week of installing, he said, there's something wrong with this air conditioner. The person said, no, everything is fine. It's running, keeping everything cool. We said, yeah, it's keeping it cool, but it's not working okay. And he said, something's wrong with your information because everything's fine. So we insisted and they finally sent someone. And they found that some equipment on the outdoor unit had failed. So they had fans and other things. So one of the fans had failed. What we detected was nothing to do with harmonics, but something very simple. That your compressor has been running a lot longer than it should. So because the heat exchange efficiency there was less, this had to run a lot longer. So the fix was not much, but the energy savings and all those aspects was much larger. So some of these things are very simple, easy to understand. It's like your human body, right? Temperature goes up. I know I have fever. Now the question is, why do I have fever? And that's what we are helping. We're not just stopping with fever and say, take a crocin, you're fine. Crocin fine means your body is fighting it in a different way. There could be a other issue. What we're doing is going into that detail and saying, this could be the issue. Here's how you can find it. So that's why, and I keep saying that it's like putting an ECG around each equipment. That's what we're doing.
So you still access the existing sensor network information or no?
We can, but we typically what ends up happening is we find that what we capture is good enough for us, or we use that more as a kind of a confirmation of what we are doing. Because a lot of times when like you just said, this is too good to be true. That's what it starts with. So when we do this, and we show them the confirmation there also. We say, okay, based on what we're doing, this is what your numbers should be. And they say, oh yeah, that's right. That's coming to that. That's where.
So as a follow-up, like you mentioned a lot of modeling. So is it equipment related modeling or is it analytical related or parametric modeling?
So what we do is hybrid modeling is what we call it. So we start off with analytical models of various equipment. So even if you take refrigeration, there's some basic principles of how refrigeration works. But that's a basic model, but then we calibrate those with actual data that we're collecting in the field and use that to say this is how this is supposed to work.
Yeah, basically, I live in the world of modeling and simulation for refrigeration equipment for most part of my career. So a little bit curious, how we are actually able to live without modeling.
No, we work that way.
Excellent presentation, and I mean a new way of looking at energy savings and all that. So how small or how small of an equipment can this be applied on, or where does it break even, or how is it? How do you decide that?
So the simple thing is, like, rather than saying equipment, what we do is we look at facilities. So the smallest facility I have run where it is economically viable is a 1,500 square foot bank branch. Okay. So a 1,500 foot bank branch has probably about 15-20 circuits on it with equipment, usually air conditioners, 3 or 4 air conditioners, manager room, some things, and then rest of it is lighting and your signboards, etc. That's the smallest we looked at. The largest we are doing is about a 2.5 million square foot mall in the Middle East.
Great, thank you. Follow-up question is, right now you said your models are based on the input panel and the electrical characteristics of the panel and all that.
Yeah.
Like if we wanted to work on fossil fuel related things,
Yeah.
can this also be applied
so,
there as
so,
well?
So when we look at this thing, when you say fossil, it's not panels. Even the modeling is still on the equipment itself. We just capturing the data from this and disassociating based on the characteristic of the equipment.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. So building onto that facility sizing, so do you think this model will be down the line available for individual homeowners and residential complexes?
Definitely. So we are actually working on we actually built a small prototype, and we have 2 or 3 utility companies in the Middle East who are extremely interested in taking that to market. Reason why is one of the countries that we're working in, the locals of that, they don't pay electricity bill. And they have huge villas, about 1,200 square meters, so 12,000 square feet villas. And their electricity bills are amazingly high. So they consume about 20,000 to 30,000 units of electricity a month. Right? So if you're in India, a 12,000 square foot villa, you're basically saying 20,000 square units is about 2 lakh. 2 lakh rupees a month of electrical bill. So we are helping that, because they're looking at not charging them for it because they don't charge, but they looking at giving them some credits to say, if you consume less than so much, we'll give you this credit. If you consume more than, then we'll take away some credit from you. So they're trying to incentivize them for that. But yes, residential is something that we're definitely, we do cooperative living, so what you call high-end PGs. We help them understand room by room how much energy is consumed, because some of the PGs have challenges where they say, look, we don't want them to cook in the room and we don't want them to run certain equipment in the room, so we help them understand it. We work with a multi-tenanted building, small office space someone was renting, they suddenly, and the way their model work was, they said, okay, all inclusive in the rent. What they found, what we were able to tell them is their electricity bill is high. And when they found out what was happening is they were running mining machines. When I say mining, data mining machines in blade servers in that room. As a result, 24/7 they were consuming significant amount of electricity. So things like that you can find out.
It's almost like a breach of privacy. So like you cannot, so everything you are using, so you would know, right? So every appliance you're using, so it is at that granular level.
So my answer to you is very true. So the question is how you use that data, right? So I'll put it this way, today your phone, that's something that almost every app you're using, you've given them permission to scan and check your SMSs, and every SMS comes and says, this payment is due on this date, you're overdue, so they get all the information about you from that. So the question is not, I don't think you can deny and say, I no longer am going to give information. It's like, how do you use that information?
So definitely data is power, and this is an excellent example of how we can use to save power, this power to go ahead and save power. So thank you very much. It was a very fantastic presentation, and I would now like to request, you have one more question? Okay, yeah. A huge round of applause before we move on to the next question. It was a very good presentation.
Request to throw some light on your patents.
Okay, so my background is in electrical power systems. So I have done work on hydrogen fuel cells. I built from 91 to 95, I worked with electric vehicles. So I built 3 electric vehicles using some very unique battery technology. So zinc, bromine batteries. I worked with the US government on a project where we were building a high altitude aircraft, which is a 200-foot wingspan solar plane with a mission to fly around the Earth once. So that needed a solar panel, hydrogen fuel cell and electrolyzer. So today what you are seeing is green hydrogen. The technology was, that's something we had developed at that point of time. So my patents are around application of a lot of these different systems in these unique applications, starting from a very small hydrogen fuel cell power system we built for professional video cameras that television news crews use, to equipment that military uses, to data centers.
So I would now like to request Srinivas sir to please come and felicitate Mr. Murli here. Before we move on to our last session, we'll break for tea for just about 10 minutes. I would like request you to please be on time. We'll reconvene in just about